My top 50 albums of 2018. This video is long overdue, so I don't want to waste any time, but I do want to run through two things first. First of all, I didn't get a chance to do a best EPs list this year, so I just want to run through and give you guys my picks anyways, just so you could see what my list would have been. At number 15, Sugar and Spice by Hatchie. 14, My Dear Melancholy by The Weeknd. 13, Collapse by Aphex Twin. 12, And Here With You I Am by S. Reedy. 11, Cybercop by Horror. 10, Clear Tame by Igloo Ghost. 9, Sync by Sunan Archives. 8, What Happens When I Try to Relax by Open Mike Eagle. 7, Be Patient by Zilla Kami and Sauce Mula. 6, Among Horses 3 by Haley Hendrix and Max Garcia Canover. 5, On the Run by Young Thug. 4, Crush by Raven Lene. 3, La Maison Noire / The Black House by Petite Noir. 2, Sailor Sessions 2 by Sadistic. And number 1, FM by Vince Staples. So that's what my EP list would have been, just so you guys can get my picks, as I said. And before the actual list, I do have some honorable mentions that I also wanted to shout out. Pure Beauty by Shirt, All for a Cascade by Vale Smith, I Am Greater Than I Was by 21 Savage, Golden Hour by Casey Musgraves, Direct Line to My Creator by Duin Dita, God's Favorite Customer by Father John Misty, Chime by Dessa, Illusions by Black Noise, Taboo by Denzel Curry, and then I don't let myself put film scores on my best albums list, but I do want to shout out Phantom Thread by Johnny Greenwood and Annihilation by Ben Salisbury and Jeff Barrow, because both of those are phenomenal scores that I love listening to, but you know, I just don't put them on my list because I find it hard to separate my enjoyment of the scores from my enjoyment from the film as well, so I just don't like ranking it amongst them, but just shout out to those for being great scores and great albums. But now to get into the actual list, starting things off at number 50, I already have a bit of a cheat pick because I have Freddy by Freddie Gibbs and Fetty by Freddie Gibbs Currency and The Alchemist both at this spot. Both of these projects feature very traditional styles of hip-hop, with Freddy being more gritty, trap-based, and then Fetty being very soul sample heavy, and neither are breaking any ground, but that's not really what I go to them for. It's just Freddy doing this type of street gangster rap to its absolute best. I mean, he just sounds fantastic. Over the production he's given, there's some great bars across these things, and both are only a little over 20 minutes, so they don't overstay their welcome. At 49, I have In a Poem Unlimited by US Girls, a great politically charged pop record. At 48, I have Care For Me by Saba, with a really introspective yet accessible hip-hop record. At 47, I have a very harsh, hypnotic noise record in the form of Lunasolar by Mayuka Hino. At 46, I have Swimming by Mac Miller, which is a very personal dive into his mental state, and it just finds him kind of talking about his struggles with his demons, but also overcoming them. The overarching theme of this album, I think, is very positive. At 45, I have Dirty Computer by Janelle Monáe. The songwriting on this isn't as strong as it has been on her previous projects, but it's still a set of really fantastic pop songs and a good addition to her discography, in my opinion. At 44, I have Aerozone by Vane, which is a really creative metalcore record. They throw in a lot of influences from other genres that you don't usually hear blended with metalcore, and I mean, the whole thing is just a giant adrenaline rush. At 43, I have Kanoyo, where Tim Hecker took these very rustic, ancient Japanese instruments and paired them up with a much more futuristic electronic-based sound and created yet another great ambient record. At 42, I have Filha de Mil Mujeres, I think that's how you pronounce it, by Clau Anis. This is just a great Brazilian art rock album, and I would like to point out that every album that I've had on this list so far has been a very strong 7 for me. Everything going forward is an 8 or higher. I'm only making this distinction because I didn't get to review most of these projects, so just for anyone who's curious what my score for them would be. At 41, I have the self-titled record from Marlo, where Larange brought some fantastic production to complement Solemn Brigham's really unique kind of melodic flow. At 40, I have There Is a Place by Maisha, which is just a really lovely, beautiful spiritual jazz record. 39, I have Crumbling, where Mid-Air Thief crafts a really unique soundscape using acoustic guitars and these really shimmering electronics. 38 is Time Will Die and Love Will Bury It by Rollo Tomasi. This one has grown on me a bit as the year has gone on. It's a really fantastic mathcore record that is simultaneously pummeling and brutal, and then also really serene and life-affirming at the same time. I don't know how they managed to walk that line so perfectly, but they do. 37, I have a really sweet and endearing indie rock album with Future Me Hates Me by the Beths. At 36, I have El Malcare by Rosalia, where she takes flamenco and blends it with a ton of different genres. Like, almost every song on here is just like a new style of music and then blended with flamenco. There's a lot of creativity on here. A lot of really catchy songs, even though I don't know the language. So many of these songs are constantly stuck in my head, and I really liked Rosalia's transition here from what she was doing on her last album to a more pop-centric music. She made the transition really nicely and didn't sacrifice, in my opinion, any artistic merit, because I mean, on De Aquino Salas, where those like car sounds are used in the instrumental, like there's a lot of really creative stuff going on here still. At 35, I have QP by Ichiko Aoba, which is just, it's sheer beauty. Like, there's nothing else you can really say to describe this besides, like, it's just utterly beautiful. All you have is Ichiko Aoba and her marvelous voice over some really lavish, lush and just subtle and fragile acoustic guitar playing, and that's all it is, but you don't need any more than that. And I don't even speak Japanese, and I bet you if I did, this would probably be like a top 10 of the year, like, because I bet you the lyrics on this thing are just beautiful as hell, and if I could understand them, it would connect with me even more. But already as it is, it hits you so hard, it's so lovely, you just want to wrap yourself in it like a great, really warm blanket. With 34, I have Loner by Caroline Rose. There weren't many albums last year that had as much wit and personality as this one does, and she wraps all that up in some very sticky indie pop tunes. At 33, I have Stranger Fruit by Zeal and Ardor. These guys took blues and gospel and then paired up those styles with death metal, and the end result is something that you wouldn't expect to be as good as it is, but I mean, it's just a really creative blend of genres that come together really well, and this is a really fiery, passionate record. I love this thing. At 32, I have Your Queen is a Reptile by Sons of Kemet. Just a great African jazz record here. I love the variety of moods and grooves they brought across this thing. At 31, I have Tierra Whack with Whack World. This is a 15-track album where every song is only a minute long, and what's most impressive about it to me is that she's able to fully develop these songs in that short runtime. And yeah, the way they're composed is that they might randomly cut off at points, but that's also part of the appeal. You're constantly jumping from world to world. It's very zany, colorful. There's just so much personality in this thing. Each song makes their individual mark on you. These songs are constantly getting stuck in my head. It's such a fun, kooky ride from start to finish, and it has so much replay value given how short it is, and it doesn't leave me wanting more, really. It just makes me want to play it again. Like, I don't listen to this and think, oh man, this is good, but I wish they had, you know, all these songs at 3 or 4 minutes long each. No, like, I'm happy with the way it worked out. You know, the short runtime to me is part of the appeal, and you just get to keep running it through and through again. And if you actually have this thing on repeat, it loops really well from the last track back into the first one. So you can just do that. You can just listen to this thing 4 times in the run of an hour, and boom, there you go. You have your regular full-size record. And I'm just really excited to see what Tierra does in the future, whether she keeps with this short song concept or she does some other crazy thing in the future. But yeah, one of the most creative things I heard last year, and one of the brightest futures, I think, or at least one of the artists that I'm most looking forward to seeing what they do next. At 30, I have the self-titled project from Avondale Bowling Club. This is some really awesome jazz rap, and I'm going to be honest, the first 4 songs on this thing, like that stretch of songs, is near perfect to me. If it had kept up that quality, this would have been like top 10 material. That's not to say that the last 4 songs are bad, not at all. They're still very good, but they just don't maintain that super high, mind-blowing level of quality. But despite that, this thing is very personal, it's very dark. You find Tom dealing with a lot of his demons, and it's a great listen overall, and you see him kind of, you know, doing away with these demons thanks to the birth of his son, and just seeing the progression over the course of the album. It's something that's great to hear, and I mean, I do like, you know, the last songs on this thing are necessary in terms of content. I just think that, you know, he might be kind of recycling some things by the end, but I don't want to criticize this thing. It's still very good, and definitely recommended. At 29, I have May Your Kindness Moraine by Courtney Marie Andrews. This is the type of country music that I love to hear. It just sounds so sweet and warm and welcoming. I mean, it feels like warm honey being poured into my ears. At 28, I have Soil by Serpent with Feet. This album to me perfectly walks the line of being very sweet and endearing, and then also being very creepy and obsessive, and I just like how he frames that in the lyrics. He kind of blurs the lines between love and obsession, and I think that's a common theme throughout. I mean, a lot of the lyrical motifs on this thing are just very bizarre in nature, and he's doing all this over some very off-kilter, left-field instrumentation. I especially love the incorporation of, I think it's clarinets on a lot of these songs, because you just don't hear clarinets used often in art pop or neo-soul or whatever you want to categorize this as. At 27, I have Hell or High Water by City Morgue. This project to me is just something I throw on whenever I want to go absolutely batshit crazy. I don't think I've heard a project in the past few years that has as much raw energy and just fire as this one does. And I mean, these guys, Zillakami and Sauce Mula, they really sound like they were just let out of some insane asylum, and the lyrics reflect that, their vocal delivery reflects that, and I mean, I guess some of these songs might get a bit samey, but they're differentiated enough in terms of the flows and the different deliveries that they bring on here, and just, I guess, the choruses. And I don't know, maybe if these guys continue making music like this on the next few projects, I'll get bored of it, but for this one, like 33-minute contained project here, I just never get sick of it. I've played this thing so many times. 26, I have Joy as an Act of Resistance by Isles. Just some really fantastic, politically charged punk music here. This is what punk music needs to be. It just needs to be telling people how it is, and like they just don't give a fuck what anyone thinks of them. I just think that for making this type of really overt political music, punk is where you gotta do it, and you gotta do it as well as these guys do, with really fantastic, grungy instrumentation. I mean, this album is produced, I think, a lot lot better than their last project, and they've really just leveled up from what was already a fantastic album with Brutalism, and I'd say these guys are going to be pretty big in the future. Not to say that they're not big now, but I mean, I think they can get even bigger than they are. I can see these guys headlining festivals someday. At 25, I have Kids See Ghosts. This is the best that both Kanye and Cudi have been in years. Just some great psychedelic rap here. At 24, I have Mark Kozlik Self-Titled. I just find this project very hypnotizing, comforting, and inspiring, relatable, and consoling. I know this project and Mark in general is just not for everyone, but I love his rambling style of songwriting. I just love how he focuses on the small things in life, just things that nobody else would ever think to write about. He does, and also like his very, just going on a tangent style of writing. Like he'll be talking about one thing and just go on a tangent talking about some completely unrelated thing, and then at the end of the song, like 10 minutes later, just bring it back to what he was talking about at first. And I can understand how some people might find it super annoying and agonizing or whatever, but for me, it's just very endearing. I love it. I really never get sick of hearing Mark just ramble on about admittedly nonsense, but personally, I think the way he does it, as I said, very endearing. Great stuff once again from Mr. Mark Kozlik. At 23, I have Grievous by Convulsing with a really epic gargantuan black metal record. Whenever I listen to this thing, I just feel like I'm watching some super epic boss battle for like 40 minutes. And I know that no video game would ever actually have this as the soundtrack, but that's just the type of grand scale images that it puts in my head as I'm listening to it. At 22, I have the newest album from Blood Orange. Dev Hynes gets very reflective on this project, just talking about always being the odd one out, giving us a bit of content about growing up and getting bullied and how hard that was for him. So all of that is very touching, and he does it over his very slick, glistening production. There's just something about his production. It just, every single instrumental just sounds like it's sparkling, and the entire thing just has this very spacey nighttime feel. I mean, this is a great album to listen to at like 3 in the morning. At 21, I have I Need to Start a Garden by Haley Hendrix. This is a really fantastic folk record with some of the best songwriting that I've heard all year. At 20, I have Everything's Fine by Jean Grey and Quelly Chris. This is a really great political record because they're kind of just taking the piss most of the time. Like most of this thing is really sarcastic and satirical, but then there are songs like River and Peacock where finally they break and say like, yeah, we're kind of joking here, but this is some serious shit and it's stuff that we need to pay attention to. And I love how, they're tackling everything in modern day society and just how fake and fabricated it all is. And they're doing it over some of the most lavish and colorful hip-hop production that I heard all last year. At 19, I have Room Inside the World by Ott. This is just a fantastic post-punk album, extremely well produced. I love the vocals on this thing, and the songwriting is also really fantastic. At 18, I have Ultraviolet by Kelly Moran. This album has a very unique instrumental palette using its prepared piano and woozy synthesizers, and it uses these to create such an incredible meditative headspace. Just so radiant and psychedelic and soothing. It's a fantastic journey from start to finish. At 17, I have Orpheus versus the Sirens by Hermit and the Recluse, aka Ka, and I'm sorry I can't remember the producer's name right now, but I'll put it on screen. But they make a fantastic duo because the producer, he sets Ka up with some of the best beats that he's ever wrote on that also do a fantastic job of capturing the ancient Greek mythology feel that is running throughout all the lyrics on here, because Ka, he's just using these ancient Greek motifs and themes and metaphors to craft, one of the most creatively written hip-hop albums that I heard all last year. Like the fact that he is able to so perfectly draw parallels between things in his life and then stuff from ancient Greek mythology, it's just so damn cool to me. And I mean, this guy, like as a writer, I don't really think you can say that anyone is better than him. There may be people you can argue are on his level, but I mean, you listen to like The Knight's Gambit, Honor Killed the Samurai, and then this project, I mean, the way this guy writes, like, it's just so brilliant. Like, I could tell this guy is like smart as fuck in real life, and it just, what an incredible writer he is. And over this production, I mean, I think this might actually be my favorite project from him to date. At 16, I have Think Peace by Clarence Clarity. This is some very forward-thinking, outlandish pop music. I think he took all the creativity from his last record and then this time whittled it down to a more concise and compact experience. At 15, I have Room 25 by No Name. No Name is one of the most unique rappers out right now. She has such a distinctive flow and cadence and just presence on the microphone with a very delicate, whispery delivery that can still hit very hard when she wants it to, and the content across this thing is super hard hitting, especially on songs like Don't Forget About Me and Part of Me, Prayer Song, Blaxploitation. The entire record really is just super poignant, hits you right to your core, and instrumentally this thing is super lavish, very beautiful, very soulful, and No Name, she's one of the best rappers out right now, and I don't really see her ever putting out a project that's bad. I think this is an improvement on Telephone, and I have faith in her that she can improve even more next time. At 14, I have Oil of Every Pearl's Uninsides by Sophie, with a super wonky, off-the-wall electronic record that finds her doing 9 songs that basically all do completely different things. The only 2 songs on here that are remotely similar are Pony Boy and Face Shopping, 2 massive bass heavy bangers. And the rest of these things, you know, you could basically talk about a different thing for each of these songs. You have It's Okay to Cry, which is a really beautiful, sincere ballad. You have Immaterial, which is an insanely infectious pop song. You have Pretending, which is this weird, dark ambient piece. You have Not Okay, which is this super glitchy, trippy song. You have Whole New World, which is like this 9-minute epic, super progressive and transformative piece that is like loud and distorted as hell. And Sophie, all across this thing, she's just throwing sounds at you that you've really never heard before, trying to describe some of the sounds on here. Is actually kind of fun, just the insane metaphors you have to come up with to even begin to describe what you're hearing on here. At 13, I have Iridescence by Brockhampton. At this point, this is my favorite album from these guys. There's just so much pure creativity on display here. Every time I return to this thing, I always forget like how great it is, and then I return to it and I'm like, oh fuck, this is amazing front to back. When I first listened to it, I originally had some problems with a few songs. I wasn't huge on songs like Berlin, Something About Him, Thug Life, but I mean, now all those songs to me are fantastic. There's really not a weak moment on this thing to me, and front to back, they're just, once again, it's a project where they're just jumping around between so many different ideas, but I think as a contained package, it works super well because they carry over a lot of themes from song to song, and the main theme of the record really is just talking about mental health, anxiety, self-acceptance, stuff like that, so the kind of chaotic nature of the styles on here, I think actually works really well in terms of that because it kind of reflects the mental state of someone who is going through tough times like this. So sonically, it works well with the themes as well, but then like the actual music on here is just so damn creative. You have songs like District and Jouvert and New Orleans, which are super rambunctious, off the wall, filled with energy. You have your more somber ballad type tracks like San Marcos and Tanya, and then Wait is like the album centerpiece in my opinion. It goes through so many incredibly moving and powerful phases, and all the verses on this song are so incredibly powerful. I actually regret not putting it on my best songs list. I don't know why I looked over it, but either way, it's one of the best songs I heard last year, and it's just great that this is their first album with a major label, and it's probably their most creative yet, so it's good to know that being signed to a label is not going to hold them back from doing insane stuff. And it was their first ever #1 album too, so it didn't really stop the success of it. So can't wait to hear more from these guys in the future. I mean, I've been a big fan of them since the first Saturation, and I think these guys are going to continue being one of the most exciting groups in hip-hop. At 12, I have Aviary by Julia Holter. This thing is just a sprawling, gorgeous labyrinth of an album. I mean, every song is like just filled with twists and turns of the most beautiful things I've ever heard. Really, like, I'm just in awe every time I listen to some of the songs on here, like Turn on a Light, Every Day is an Emergency, Kaitis and Gardens Mutinous, I Shall Love To. Really, every song on here, like, no two songs really offer the same thing. I mean, the closest you get is I Shall Love 1 and 2, because they kind of play on the same motifs. But besides that, everything just offers something completely new. Like I said, I feel like I'm walking through this extravagant labyrinth that's just like made of emerald, and I'm stealing this from a fucking Rate Your Music review, but I don't even give a shit because it was so accurate when I read that description, because yes, I just feel like I'm walking through this super mystical, enchanting landscape that's just like trying to seduce me into how beautiful it is. And like there's some moments like Every Day is an Emergency that are a bit harsher and distressing too, but like you always get the calm after the storm, like on that song where after like the harsh bagpipes, you get that really beautiful piano section. So, you know, there's never a moment where you don't feel completely comforted, in my opinion. There's just such a dense variety of instrumentation, and the way the songs are composed are really unconventional and creative. I mean, Kaitis, whatever the hell she's doing in the middle of that song with that like weird vocal riffing, the joy, joy, it's one of the strangest things I've ever heard, but it works so goddamn well. And this is definitely the most ambitious thing she's done to date, I think, for sure, and all that ambition really paid off. There's not a moment on this that I didn't think worked. At 11, I have Daytona by Pusha T. Pusha T is one of my favorite rappers of all time, and it's funny because he doesn't have an album really that I'd put amongst my favorites of all time, but it's just that anytime this guy hops on a song, he kills it. Like, just as a rapper, as a pure rapper, really, I don't think I've ever heard a verse from this guy that sucked. I mean, you got songs like Circles, I guess, where he's more mediocre, but 99% of the time, he's not even mediocre. He's just on his top of his game. He just sounds incredible. His super menacing and growling presence, and like he's just so commanding. He takes his time. He's not out here trying to impress you with super speedy, insane flows. Like, he just takes his time, does what he does, delivering, you know, insanely witty, clever, creative bars, lyrics, a lot of great double entendres, wordplay, metaphors, all that good stuff. And there's really no better display of all that than on this album right here. He kills every single one of his verses. This thing's just chock full with some of the best verses I heard all last year. There's so many damn quotables across this thing. Basically every line is, which is why Push's music has always had such high replay value for me, because you're not just getting a great bar like every 10 lines. It's like literally every single bar is. So there's just so much to dissect, and every time you listen, you're narrowing in on something new. And that's why like the first 20 to 30 listens of this project, I'm finding something new every time. And even now that I've listened to it like countless countless times across the span of the year, like, and I basically know all the ins and outs of it. Like now, at this point, admittedly, there's nothing new that's gonna like hit me every time. I mean, it's only 7 songs, there's only so much, but that doesn't matter because it's still fun and great to hear Pusha rapping over these incredible soul sample beats from Kanye West. It just sounds so mean and fierce on all of them. And like, I don't want to undersell the beats on here. Like, yeah, I'm focusing on Pusha's rapping because like he is what makes the project, but these are still the best beats he's ever rapped over and a big factor to why I think this is his best project to date. And now we're down to the top 10, and I have to say this is one of the strongest top 10s I've had in any year this decade, and I think that's kind of how I measure how great a year has been, because yes, every year has tons of great music, but when you actually stack the best albums from each year against each other, how does it do? This might be the best year of the decade. Like, it's definitely up there with 2016 for me, but anyways, at number 10, I have Safe in the Hands of Love by Eve Toomer. This album, to me, I don't think it should work as well as it does, and I just mean as a whole. Like, individually, like, the songs to me are just undoubtedly great, but as a whole, like, it's just so jarring, uncohesive, like it doesn't flow well at all, but somehow that adds to the appeal and the very bizarre, strange, and mystifying nature of it all. The fact that it leaves me kind of confused after every time I listen to it, I think is kind of the point. I think it's meant to really unsettle you in a way, and there's definitely a lot of songs on here that just really chill you to your core. I just get a really apocalyptic feel from songs like Economy of Freedom, Hope and Suffering, and Recognizing the Enemy, and not in the way like the Daughters album, which I'll get to in a second by the way, but like where it's like super pummeling and forceful and just super in your face, where that to me more so feels like you're just kind of alive during the apocalypse. This is more like so after the fact, like you're just wandering some really obscure wasteland, not really sure what's creeping around what corner, not really sure how you got there, how the world ended up in a state like this. And all 3 of those songs really couldn't be any more different musically, but I think the fact that they all give me that uneasy, hopeless feeling is kind of why the album does work so well as a whole. There's also some songs on here like Noid, Lifetime, and Licking an Orchid, which is a great 3-song stretch that are more pop oriented, I guess. They still do have that feeling of despair. I mean, you definitely wouldn't call any of these songs positive, especially when you look into the lyrics, but they're just a little more straightforward in terms of structure. I mean, Lifetime may be a little less of the way it builds throughout the track, but still, they're a little more structurally traditional, even though they're still testing out some really cool musical ideas. But this is just one of the most creative things that I've heard all year. I feel like I've said that about a lot of these albums, but if there's one that I'm gonna like stand by that the most, I would make the statement that this is the most creative album I heard all last year. Definitely, I think, the most unique as well, and it's just such an unsettling and yet fulfilling experience at the same time. I don't know, it's a really bizarre album. It's one that, like, coming to grips with was, like, really weird to me, but by the time I did learn to love it, like, obviously it became one of my favorite albums of the year. At 9, I have Drogas Wave by Lupe Fiasco. This is the other album from this year, along with Aviary, that taught me not to judge an album by its runtime, because when I saw that Lupe was putting out a nearly 2-hour-long album, I was like, holy fuck, this is gonna be terrible, especially coming off his last album, Drogas Light. I was like, I don't have time for this. Lupe, like, he's kind of done now. I don't expect him to come through with anything that great, but holy shit, I was wrong. I was blown away the first time I listened to this. I'm gonna be honest, it's such a dense album that I'm not gonna go too deep into it here because I would just be rambling for ages, but you should check out the review I did over on Buffalo Staples' channel with him. We went pretty deep into it there, so if you want to hear me talk about it more in depth. But basically, this has an insanely creative concept, and I guess the concept dies off a bit at around track 9 or 10, but even after that, like, thematically, it carries the same weight throughout the whole thing. I mean, Lupe is just on top of his game when it comes to rapping. I mean, like, you have 24 songs of one of the best rappers of all time, and he's just spitting his ass off. Like, no matter how many times you listen to this, you're always going to be getting something new, because it's just so much to dissect, so much to look at within each track, but then also trying to take each track in the context of the whole and trying to connect everything together. If you're someone who enjoys albums like that really make you think, this is definitely one that you're going to love. Musically, this thing is great too. I feel like this is some of the best production that Lupe has ever rapped over, and this album flows insanely well from front to back with some really well utilized interludes. At number 8, I have Veteran by JPEG Mafia. This is just an awesome cutthroat experimental hip-hop record. Peggy, he's one of the best rappers out in my opinion. He just brings so much fire to each one of these songs, and lyrically, he's super sharp. I love his no fucks given attitude. He's kind of gunning for everyone on this thing. No one is safe from his criticism. The production on here is super abstract and almost formless at times. I find it really impressive what he did with some of these songs and how they kind of take a few listens for you to even like find the groove in them and for you to understand kind of the pocket he's created. I mean, the fact that he's able to rap over some some of these beats is impressive enough in my mind, the fact that he was able to find a pocket in them. At number 7, I'm kind of cheating again. I have both albums that Mike dropped last year with Warren My Pen and Renaissance Man. Mike, he's just completely in his own lane. Like, honestly, this is unlike anything I've ever heard, and I'm still standing by Eve Toomer being the most unique overall, but as far as hip-hop goes, I think this is the most unique thing that I heard last year, or both of these are. First of all, the sample work on these things, it's fucking mind-blowing. Like, I still listen to this shit, I'm like, how the fuck did, like, whoever produced these songs, I don't know if Mike did or someone else, but, like, the way they chop these things up, like, it boggles my mind. Like, there's some songs on here that, like, I've listened to these projects plenty of times over, but there's some songs that, like, still I'm like, how the fuck does someone come up with this? And the way Mike carries himself over these beats, like, it's so unorthodox. Like, I almost don't even know how to describe it, because usually when you say that a rapper blends in with the instrumental, you're using it in the case of an artist like a Travis Scott, where it's because, like, he's super melodic, so, like, they mix his voice in to where it kind of feels like it's part of the instrumental. But, like, Mike, you know, he's super low, monotone, reserved. Like, he's not melodic at all, but just, like, he just feels like he's just infused with the beat. And it has this great effect where it doesn't change how you see, like, the musical and instrumental aspects of the song, but it makes Mike feel just, like, lost and buried, which pairs perfectly with the sentiments that he's expressing on these songs, because lyrically this is very somber and depressing for the most part. Though I will say there are songs across both these projects that do still feel very downtrodden, but also just express just, like, a pure sentiment of love and admiration for some of the things and people in his life. The other thing I love about the way his vocals are mixed and the weird murky way he rides these beats is that it gives me a really unique listening experience where I'll just be there listening and I get very lost in the instrumentals. They're super hypnotic and meditative and psychedelic, but then, like, since his voice is mixed so low, like, you don't really take in his verses as a whole. Like, I kind of just get lost in this headspace, and then just, like, certain lines just kind of, like, fly out, pop out at me, and then, like, so, like, even though, like, he is rapping the entire time, it's just certain lines that I catch here or there that, like, as a whole kind of, like, paint this image for me. Like, you just get the main ideas just from lines here or there, or at least that's, like, kind of how I listen to it. But then also, if you do go in and dissect, like, the verses lyric for lyric, they still hold up really well, and it's like each time it might be new different lines that kind of just, like, the one line that sticks out to me at that moment, and it, like, just makes for such a meditative experience, because, like, I don't have to take it in all at once. I just get, like, these little nuggets of kind of wisdom and reflection, and I don't know, like, maybe that's not how everyone else would take it, but I think the way that it's mixed, and again, the way that he raps, it just kind of allows for that more unique meditative experience. At 6, I have You Won't Get What You Want by Daughters. As I alluded to earlier, this is apocalyptic, but in the way where it is, like, pummeling in your face, like, you feel like you're really witnessing the apocalypse. It's just so hellish and dark. Like, it really is just like a black hole of just total despair and hopelessness. But man, is this thing produced incredibly well. Like, sonically, it's weird because it is so harsh and frightening and scary, but it also is just so satisfying. Like, it's this weird contrast where, like, it builds up this really ominous, frightening, terrifying, harsh presence, while also, like, being very, you know, sonically stimulating in a way. Like, it sounds so good. Just all the textures and layers on here, I almost feel like it makes it easier to digest. Like, someone who's not usually into noise rock might be able to get into this versus some more harsher sounding stuff. But I mean, the vocals on this thing are utterly manic. I think the pacing on this album is actually phenomenal, just like the way it kind of switches between tempos and moods and how it might build up and die down at some points. Like, you know, you start more subtle with City Song, and then at the end of City Song, like, everything goes crazy, and then you go into Long Road No Turns, which is just utter batshit, and then you kind of speed up in the middle with those two, like, 2-minute songs, like I Don't Lie, and then Cry About It. Like, both those, I forget what they're called, like, one of them is like the Lord's Song, I think, or something, but either way, and, like, those songs are absolutely insane. And then you go into Less Sex, things kind of die down again before they, like, ramp up at the end to just, like, this grand, super insane climactic ending. So yeah, pacing wise, this thing is fantastic. Overall, like, I see why Fantano gave this a 10, baby. Like, it wouldn't be that for me, but shit, it's a fantastic album. At number 5, I have Dead Magic by Anna von Housewolf. This is one of the most hauntingly beautiful things I've ever heard. We just have a set of really sprawling, spine-chilling compositions. Anna's voice is gorgeous across this whole thing, but also slightly terrifying at times, especially on songs like The Truth, The Glow, The Fall, and The Mysterious Vanishing of Electra. I also love kind of the variety that we get on here in terms of instrumentation. We have the heavier songs like The Mysterious Vanishing of Electra, and then these more very spacey, moody songs like The Marble Eye, and then songs like The Truth, The Glow, The Fall, and Ugly and Vengeful blend them both together in these really massive, transcendent pieces. I'm telling you, listening to this album in the middle of the woods in the dead of winter while it's freezing cold and pitch black is one of the most weirdly peaceful experiences that I've had all year. And yeah, it's that type of album, you know, it sets a very specific mood, hits a very specific note in me. At number 4, I have Year of the Snitch by Death Grips, and it's insane to me that this deep into their career, I mean, not that long years-wise, but albums-wise, like this is their 6th or 7th studio album, and they just can't stop being creative. This might be the freakiest thing they've done yet, and that blows my mind how they're still able to innovate like this. I mean, songs like Black Paint, The Fear, Flies, Shit Show, Ha Ha Ha, they're just doing some crazy ass shit on here, and as to be expected with Death Grips, it goes over insanely well. They also have plenty of songs on here where they're perfecting the incorporation of the gabber influences from their last EP, and lyrically, I think this is one of their strongest projects to date. If you watched my review for it, I had this like crazy ass theory for what I thought the lyrics as a whole meant, but even if you take it track by track, I just think that this is some of the most interesting lyrical content that Ride has given us to date. I will say, sadly, it's not quite a 10 for me anymore. I did give it a 10 back when I reviewed it, and everything I said in that review, I still stand by. It's just that it just doesn't quite have that 10 feeling. Like, it's so damn close. It's a super strong 9, but just I can't quite give it that 10. But I still did have 3 10s this year. You know, 2 you will know about from reviews I did. 1, you know, I did review. I didn't give it a 10, but it has grown on me, and you'll see what that is in a second. But anyways, so ordering this top 3 was so fucking hard. That was like the only hard part of making this list, is that, you know, every day I'd wake up and I'd have a new album of the year. Like, just putting these in a order that like would stay consistent for more than a day was impossible, but I finally settled on an order, and you know, it's been the same for about like 2 weeks now. So I mean, hey, I think that's as consistent as I'm gonna get. So anyways, the first of my 3 10s this year, because yeah, we had a fucking great year this year. I mean, I had 3 10s, that's insane. But yeah, the first of them at number 3 is Cocoa Sugar by Young Fathers. I mean, even just saying that feels wrong. Like, how is this not my album of the year? I mean, I know number 3 is still good, but I just feel like I'm doing it a disservice by putting it at 3. But anyways, it is what it is, because I'd say that about any album I put here. But yeah, this is just such a euphoric and life-affirming listen. Every song on here just gives me this overwhelming feeling of everything is going to be okay. Even in its darker moments like Tremolo, you still see this light at the end of the tunnel. When I listen to a song like Lord, as corny as it may sound, it just reminds me what it feels like to be alive. Like, if I was ever at a point in my life where I'm just feeling totally dead inside, like, and I play that song, it just completely rejuvenates me. I also love the lyrics on here, how they touch on today's political climate, but in a really subtle way, and how they do always almost have very positive undertones. Like I said, this is a very hopeful, rejuvenating album, and not everything I like has to be all dark and dreary. I do like things that, at the end of the day, just give me a sense of hope and optimism, even if it is in the face of knowing that things may not be all that great overall. But on to my number 2, this is the album that grew on me since I reviewed it, and since I initially heard it, the amount this album has grown on me is, it is mind-boggling. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. The fact that this is a 10, the fact that when I first heard it, I would have given it like a 2 out of 10, and just like my entire experience with this album, it doesn't even make any sense. But fuck it, number 2, Playboi Carti with Die Lit. I love this album so fucking much, and like I said, when I first heard it, I hated this shit. And even when I first reviewed it in my unreviewed albums video with my little segment on it, you know, it had grown on me a tiny bit since then, but I still gave it like a 3 out of 10. I still really did not like it at all. And then out of nowhere, I guess not out of nowhere, like I kind of just became a little obsessed with it, because guys like Buffalo Staple and Rick DeLay, who like saw more in it than I did, like I just couldn't comprehend it. I couldn't wrap my head, like, how do you guys hear anything more than a super derivative, really boring, and just tedious trap album? And so like I kind of got obsessed with it a bit, like just trying to figure out what they heard, and eventually, I don't know what it was, but it just clicked. And since then, I have not been able to put this thing down. Like, this thing is just like, it's so damn addictive. I really, you look at how much I've played this thing, it's insane, and I never get sick of it. In fact, the more I play it, the more I love it. And if you really want an in-depth look of why I love it, check out my review for it. It's like 30 minutes long of me diving into this thing, and the only thing that's changed is that, like I said, that I didn't really like Right Now, Flatbed Freestyle, and Mileage. I love those by now, and so everything else I said in the review, I stand by, which is why it's gone from a 9 to a 10, because those 3 songs grew on me. But the gist of it is, this album is kind of 2 things for me at once. It's both a really psychedelic, trippy experience front to back if I just want to kind of sit off and zone out to it, or it can be a collection of insanely fun and creative bangers. Like, depending on my mood, I can really listen to this in 2 different ways. There's 19 tracks on this thing, and I find that no 2 of them kind of repeat the same gimmick. I love how we're getting such a wide variety of styles on here, and a lot of the songs on here are doing things that you don't really hear done in trap at all. I mean, Poke It Out, like, when are you ever going to hear a beat that cutesy and sugary? There's Love Hurts, which is weirdly minimalistic, and even the sounds that are used on that song are actually very bizarre and futuristic sounding. You have Foreign with those weird reverse samples. There's the pizzicato strings on Shooter, the accordion on Right Now, the rambunctious punkish energy of R.I.P. I mean, not only does every song on here do a fantastic job of setting themselves apart from each other, but setting themselves apart from really anything that you're hearing in modern day trap music. But it still does come together as a very cohesive front to back experience. In fact, that's another thing that I like about it more than most trap albums, is it does feel like it was curated to be played from front to back. I mean, Long Time feels so much like a proper opener. I mean, Top feels so much like a proper closer, and then everything in between, the way everything flows into each other, it works extremely well. And then Cardi on this thing, I understand where people are coming from when they say that he's really lazy and uninteresting to listen to, but I completely disagree on that front. I think he's super charismatic. I think he has tons of personality. I think the way that he delivers so many of these lines just is so entertaining. Like, he's just such an entertaining performer to me. I think he knows perfectly how to ride a beat and how to set a mood and just how to capture the perfect tone. I mean, so many of these songs just on a musical level capture emotions that are just so pure and like that you could never just capture with words alone. Songs like Fell in Love or Home that just like convey things musically without even relying on the lyrics. And Cardi contributes to this, again, not really with his lyrics, I mean bits and pieces here or there, but just with his presence. Like on Fell in Love, like he just sounds so damn infatuated with whoever he's talking about, and he captures that feeling perfectly, and he does that all across here. When he needs to be hype, he's hype. When he needs to be somber, he's somber. Like, and I know that sounds simple, but it's not just the fact that he does it, it's the fact that he does it so effectively. And like on songs like Pull Up, where he's just like, yeah, he's kind of taking a step back, he's riding the beat very loosely, but he does it so that it can just capture that very psychedelic feeling. Like, he's not trying to overpower it, he's just trying to blend in with it, become part of the instrumental. And unlike I was talking about with Mike earlier, actually doing it in a way where it does enhance the overall musical elements of the song. So anyways, I know there are some people out there who might think I'm crazy for loving an album like Dial It as much as I do, and I understand, but it doesn't change the fact that this is one of my favorite albums of the year. I mean, I'd say at this point, of all time. I mean, what the hell, man? Like, I've just played this so much, and I really can't see myself stopping anytime soon, and I honestly just want to listen to it right now. Like, I'm itching to listen to this thing, because goddamn, it's amazing. I don't even care. But yeah, it's not my number 1 of the year, because it happened to also come out in the year where Some Rap Songs by Earl Sweatshirt was released. So yeah, Earl Sweatshirt had my number 1 song of the year, number 1 album as well, and holy fuck, this thing, it's amazing. Like Dial It and Cocoa Sugar, I can say those are albums that I could probably safely put in like my top 100 of all time. But this album right here, Some Rap Songs, like if I love this album as much as I do now in say like 2 years time, because like obviously like it's been out for only a little over a month and a half now. I'm not going to go claiming it's one of my top 10 favorite albums of all time now. But if I love it as much as I do now in 2 or 3 years, it's definitely like top 15, top 10 material for me, because as much as I love this album now, it's like the same way I feel about a Mad Villainy, Lift Your Skinny Fist, like Antennas to Heaven. I'm dumbfounded by how incredible this thing is. This has some of the best sampling I've heard in my entire life, done in such creative and unique ways. I love how meticulous this album feels. Like every single element feels like it's aiming for the same goal. Like the beat, the mixing, Earl's lyrics, his flow and his delivery, like it's all adding up to the same thing. You're not just getting the ideas and emotions conveyed through his lyrics alone. Everything else is complementing it in such a powerful way that it just makes this 24-minute experience so overwhelming, but in the best way possible. Like I can't put this thing on and not give 100% of my attention to it and then feel completely blown away by it each time. Like as much as I listen to this thing, which is a hell of a lot, like I'm still blown away every time. I'll put this on and I have to listen to it at least like 2 or 3 times in a row. It just grabs me so hard, and it just will not let me go from start to finish. And I love the jumbled, sporadic nature of the track list and of the short songs. Like, you're constantly just like jumping around to different fragmented mind states that like perfectly encapture, I assume, like what Earl is feeling and what he's been going through over the past few years. And that's the point of this project. You get right in Earl's mind. It's deeply personal. It's almost worrying at times, like knowing this is his reality, but it's also hopeful. Like, the way it ends with Riot, it ends on a hopeful note. Like, after you've gone through all this shit, there is something to look up to. Like, and I feel like a lot of this album is about acceptance, you know, especially on a song like Azucar. I already went over that a lot in my best songs video, but just like, he's accepting where he's at in his life. And like, he's not saying that, oh, I beat depression, I'm over it. Like, he's saying, no, I'm still here, but I've accepted it and I'm living with it. And that overall sentiment that carries throughout the entire project, along with a ton of other overarching themes that I dived into way too much in my video, which is like twice the length of the album. That's how dense this thing is. It's like, you could talk about it for hours and it's only 24 minutes long. This thing is extremely powerful and moving. It's super innovative. The way Earl raps on this thing is kind of mind-boggling at times. Like, his rhyme schemes are super intricate and complex. The flows he's using, they're like weird as hell. His cadences, like, it's just so off-kilter. He's just doing some weird ass shit. Like, Earl, man, he's pushing the boundaries with this one. I really feel like this is one of the most unique hip-hop projects of the entire decade. And not just musically, but really everything he did with it. The concept, you know, the way he utilized the shorter song lengths, just the way that everything kind of reinforces each other. It's such a strongly built album that does exactly what it set out to do. And man, I'm completely in love with it. Like I said, it was hard to order my top 3, and it was, but like, at this point, I am confident in this as my number 1. Some Rap Songs by Earl Sweatshirt was my favorite album of 2018. So there you have it, my top 50 albums of 2018, or really 52, because I had both those cheat entries, but you know what, I just wanted to get as much great stuff on this list as possible, so I let myself have those. But yeah, tell me what your guys' list was down in the comment section below. Check out any albums on this list that you haven't heard, because they're all great, at least in my opinion, and I think that whether or not you like them, you'll get something cool out of them. So yeah, again, leave your list. Maybe I can get some recommendations from you guys as well. Thank you guys, as always, for watching. Thank you for watching me throughout the entirety of 2018. And I mean, like, it's already 2019 now, but I'm looking forward to another great year. Hopefully going to step up my game in terms of putting out content, because I often have very long droughts where I don't do anything. So I'm going to try to stay on top of my game more this year. But yeah, again, thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.